Okay, it's now my great pleasure to introduce from Morley College, Tim Taylor and Lawrence Elliott here on stage. And at a distance we're going to have the input from Carolyn Roy. And this is going to be about remote exchange. Over to you, Tim. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Evan. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's lovely to be here. A fantastic morning of innovation and stimulation. Lots to take back with me to Morley College, which is an adult and community college just south of the river on the borders of Lambeth and Southwark. We're going to be 125 years old from September, so lots of celebrations happening this coming year. So we are an adult and community college that specialises in a mixture of accredited and non-accredited programs. So it was very interesting hearing this morning so many of the different innovations that can be used with accredited study. Similarly, we at Morley are looking at learning that we have to capture, in a way, the learning journey through a variety of different means. People will be familiar with the term RAPA, Recognizing, Recording, Progress and Achievement. So a lot of the information that came through this morning will be very, very useful from our point of view. I'm here with Lawrence Elliott, my colleague from Morley, and if we slip to the next slide, thank you. Lawrence and I have enjoyed over the last 6 months or so working in partnership with other colleagues at Morley and also with colleagues based at Roehampton University, and have been testing ways of achieving differing kinds of communicative interaction through the use of video conferencing. So we can go on. So far, through our experiments with the term we've been using, remote exchange, so a connection achieved remotely, we have looked at compositional and choreographic exchange. So I should just give a little bit of background. I'm a dancer, a choreographer and teacher. And so I work with movement, and I work with ideas associated with movement, and the composition of, as it says there, different components. So we can think about people. We have 4 people with us today. We could also think about composition in terms of, obviously, music, words, objects, and ideas. So composition is considered loosely, broadly. The other element which we have been testing with Roehampton and with Morley has been this idea of the cultural and technological fluency. So how, through exploration, through experimentation, we find ways of interacting that make sense between each other, between ourselves, in a collaborative fashion, and also, of course, crucially, you test out what the possibilities and the constraints are. And of course, there are a number of constraints, but sometimes those very constraints create their own opportunities. And go on. So, as I mentioned, it's been experimental, and so far we've noticed that when you're working in this way, there appear to be 3 groups of people involved. The first group, the primary participants in exchange, that is those who are engaged in the very interaction itself. And today we've already met Carolyn very briefly before, Carolyn Roy, who I will introduce in properly in a moment, and our 4 student participants here, who are all students from Morley College. So today they are primary participants in exchange. Then we have also observing participants, those who act as an audience, providing an outside eye and giving feedback. That is us, the rest of us here today. And the last group, but equally important, the facilitating participants, the technical team. And both Lawrence and I have been working with colleagues from throughout the last several weeks as we prepared for today, and we benefited from that interaction as well. So there are 3 different groups achieving this end. So in a moment we're going to pass back over, and I'm going to introduce the performance. If we bring up the vision. whilst Paul's bringing our focus back, I should say that the interaction we've been exploring, again, can be seen from a dance and choreographic point of view, but we can also think about other applications. So, when I have the go-ahead, I will progress. Yes? Karen, can you hear me, my dear?
Yes.
Very good, all right. So, primary participants at exchange. I have with me Carolyn Roy, who is my colleague from Morley College, and Carolyn is a very experienced dance artist, choreographer and teacher, and Carolyn has been leading the new live art program at Morley this last year. I also have with me Kate Brown, Flavia Malin, Claire Berteau, and Daniela Silska. Now, Kate and Flavia took part in the live art program with Carolyn earlier on in the year, and Claire and Daniela both studied with me on the contemporary dance class. And I should also say that the activities that you're going to be seeing in this next section, interaction between Carolyn and the performers, is the kind of activity, for those of you who have studied dance yourselves, you'll be familiar with, but it's the kind of activity you would find going on in a rehearsal between professionals or indeed between student dance artists. And for information, the specific focus is about spatial relationships. That's what we're exploring here. What you're seeing is obviously a thumbnail of Carolyn. You're also seeing a large image of what Carolyn herself can see, and of course the dancers themselves on stage. Once we've had the interaction, which will go on for roughly 10 minutes, we'll have a little Q&A at the end. It's important in this experimental fashion, practice and research, to find out what this was like, because it's not the same as being in the same space we might imagine. And then it'd be interesting to hear from your point of view what you've noticed. And of course, we always say whatever we notice is right, because it's what we see. So I'm going to hand over to Carolyn Roy now, and let's see what happens. Thanks a lot.
Hi. Yes, so I teach live art and I teach dance. And one big difference between this setup and the normal studio setup is the sense of being live together in space. And that's something that interests me, how remotely we can still keep quality of likeness. And the other thing I'm interested in is the fact that it's a frame, a single frame that I'm really looking at, and you're looking at, and how that affects our experience of what's happening, as well as how I am communicating with the dancers remotely, how they receive my communication. So I'm going to work with some very simple exercises which are taken from a piece by Tina Segal that was done at Tate Modern a couple of years ago. So the first one is to ask you to choose two people out of the four of you and to form a triangle and to lift the triangle through space, keeping the safe distance between each. And to lift through space. And last is one of those people as far away from as possible, and one as close as possible. Can you hear me? And next, I want you thinking about using peak as one of your, or the I use one of your form triangles.
So Carolyn is pointing out that in the next section of the exercise, she herself can be one of the points of reference. Carolyn can be one of the points of reference. Thank you.
And then once again, to be able to be as close as possible to one of your people and as far away as possible from the other. Okay, thank you. That was a very neat arrangement you ended up with.
Karen, do you have one more element?
Any comment?
Very good, thank you very much. So we bring back to our configuration. Thank you very much, Carolyn. So, as I mentioned, in terms of the experience, it's important now to find out what that was like. So I'm going to ask Carolyn for her impressions, what she saw and what she noticed. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yes, so I think I could almost see them thinking, which was interesting, because I wondered if it was because of the clarity of my delivery, whether I was giving a clear enough instruction, because it seemed to come through eventually, so whether it was the clarity of the instruction or whether there was a time delay in the instruction coming through. But otherwise, I think the reception of the instruction was very clear, and actually I could see the spatial relationships unfolding. I would say it's quite, I feel as I'm looking down. It's interesting, this framing, I feel as I'm slightly looking down on you, which I wouldn't normally be at the same height, so I'm having a slightly lower relationship because of the camera angle.
Yes.
Yeah. But what about, could you hear me okay?
Some of the time we could hear you very clearly. Here and there, I don't know what the audience noticed, but here and there was perhaps a slight time lag and some of the words went. But by and large, it was pretty clear. Before we hand over to the dancers, one of the things that we've noticed in this experiment is that, to use an expression, it is all to play for. You know, nothing is off record. And the very quality of interaction becomes something that you're working with. And so I'm going to now hear from the dancers what they noticed during that interaction.
Hi, Carolyn.
Hi.
Hello. I think that the kind of bit of sort of fuzziness was that we couldn't hear you completely clearly at one point, at some points, and then also I think there might be a delay on the screen for you, so that we were already moving and then you saw it a little bit later. If that makes sense.
So that I was a bit muffled, which meant that it brought down slightly.
Your sound is cutting in and out a little bit.
Yeah.
So then we were probably thinking, because we couldn't quite hear.
Yeah.
But then I think you're receiving the image just after it happens, it looks like, from what I can tell.
Oh, okay. So I'm sort of image slightly late.
Yeah.
Ah, interesting. everything.
Does that make sense?
Yes, but it's a millisecond.
Yeah.
So that's why I always keep thinking. Because what I'm doing is actually you listening before you've heard what I said,
Yeah.
rather than you thinking about what I said.
I'm just a...
Hi Carolyn, it's Flo here.
Hi.
I think what's interesting for me was that I was very aware of the other members of the group, despite the fact that we've got an audience here today, that whereas before when I've done the exercise with you actually in the room, I've been more aware of your presence, because your presence has literally been there. Whereas today, although I could see your image, I was completely focused, I was less aware of you, more focused, I guess, on the other members of the team. So that was, it was...
Well, that's probably a good thing.
Yeah.
We should pass on, thank you.
Hi Carolyn.
Hi.
I really enjoyed that, and part of it was because to be able to hear you and to see you, and it was very stimulating because there were all these, we could hear you and see you, and I also was paying attention to the other dancers, so yeah.
Hi, Caroline, it's Leila. I'm thinking that this is really interesting and entertaining, and I found the whole thing really enjoyable and really good spend time.
Thank you.
Thank you. As I mentioned, one of the things is, thank you very much to the four dancers and to Carolyn, one of the things is about the experience, and it's stimulating and entertaining, and as we discovered this morning, then one of the things is about engagement, then that's good for teaching and good for learning. If there's anything that if we have a moment, just to ask the audience whether they might like to feedback on any questions you might have. Hello.
Yeah, I find the time lagging aspect very draining. So, in terms of completing their presenting, you don't feel that they're there, they're not present as they would normally be as dancers. And because you're seeing the time lagging thing,
Yes.
it actually creates quite a lot of humour.
It takes quite a lot of...
It actually creates a huge amount of humour.
So Carolyn, very, very interesting couple of observations there. One is that the time lag element actually is it can be quite tiring, both to watch and perhaps also to participate in relation, to what the tasks people are performing. So the time lag has an impact. And the other thing that was mentioned is that there's quite a lot of humour, quite a lot of comedy value in the time lag. So we notice that, so that's an impact. Any more questions or observations? Yes?
I can see it's been very useful with role play. Sorry. I can see it's been very useful with role play and having an extra person observing, feeding back.
Yes, the ladies mentioned that in terms of role play, having someone there to observe and feedback and interact with can be very useful. One of the things we've considered how sometimes a group of participants in one space may not want to travel 3 miles across London for a variety of reasons to be with another set of students, or maybe they can't, maybe there's something that prohibits that. This kind of connection could be valuable. Anything else? Yes, thank you.
What I really wanted to know is how you actually look at performing an assessment after this piece has actually taken place. So after the live event has happened, how is feedback given for both the learners and the tutors?
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, and one that I don't propose to open up too much now because I'm aware of time. I think that we've heard a lot about assessment today, evidencing achievement, and we know that is of paramount importance. That said, the nuances of assessment and quite what it is one is assessing becomes interesting in a creative, experiential environment such as this, where we might discuss and open up a dialogue about what it is that we're looking at and who's doing the looking and what's being measured and how. So I think those areas of discussion become interesting within this context. So we can imagine this playing out over several weeks, and we could be evidencing and documenting different elements of the process as we go. I'm going to thank you all very, very much, and we'll discuss more. I'll bring up the last screen in one moment. Carolyn, thanks for your time. Fantastic.
Thank you all dancers.
And thanks to the dancers. And if we just bring up the last slide in a moment. Okay, yeah. So I am not a technician, but I've worked with some very good technicians, notably Paul Bonnet, and he's here in the house, so please do speak to Paul at the end of the session or visit the Janet website. Thank you very much to everybody. Thank you.
Great, thank you very, very much. It's a wonderful session there. Thank you, Tim.